Welcome to Fighting Words, Season 2. We made it. We didn't get demonetized. We didn't get canceled. Wow. I'm so excited. This episode, we have Jeff Trammell, who is the showrunner for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So exciting. So we're going to talk Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, a little bit about Detroit, because I just found out he's from there, how New York is the best city in the world. And there'll be a little bit of spoilers if you aren't up to episode 5 of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So you can dip right now, save this video, come back for later. If not, you know, if you don't care, you just here for vibes and here. Get spoiled, right?
Get spoiled.
Who cares, right? So Jeff, you started off, you're not just a writer, you're an artist as well, right?
No.
What's all that art on your page?
Those are drawings of me by my friends.
What?
Yeah, I can't draw to save my life.
What a liar.
That escalated quickly.
I can write.
How did you get into writing?
So actually, I used to be a professional wrestler.
What?
Yeah.
What kind of wrestler? Like luchador?
Just straight mat wrestling, pro wrestling, go to a show.
Wow.
Yeah. It's becoming evident you didn't do any research.
So I'm very embarrassed.
We're all learning together. I used to wrestle, got out of it because it was very politic heavy, and finished up high school, went to a school for video production. I figured maybe I'll be a camera operator, an editor. 30 Rock, which was airing at the time. This was like 2009. And I remember watching like, oh, they're writers for TV. I didn't know that was like a job I could pursue growing up in Detroit. So I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So basically I like taught myself how to write from downloading scripts and books. And I entered this thing called the Nickelodeon Writing Program after years of kind of like teaching myself how to write. So I applied for that, somehow got through all of that, got to the finals. Flew out to LA, had 3 days of interviews, 13 interviews over the course of those 3 days, then won a spot at Nickelodeon and moved out here in 2015.
Wow. Now, I found out about you from Craig of the Creek, which is an incredible show, but you left us. Did you leave to join Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man?
I like you making me the villain.
You are the villain. It is your fault. I'm like, how could he leave us? How much of the show were you a part of?
I joined while the show's still in development. So I wrote what is essentially the 3rd episode of the series, and I was there until pretty much the middle of season 5.
Now, you have Green Poncho on Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Did you like him when he was on that show, or?
The character or the actor?
Both.
I love the character. The actor, no, he's great. I love Zeno Robinson. He was fantastic as Green Poncho and Carter Brown and 80 other characters. So when I knew I was going to do Spider-Man, I wanted him involved.
Now that we're on Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, what universe is this set in?
Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man universe.
Okay.
I don't know the exact number.
We'll call that universe
Yeah, I'll let Mr.
125, because he's in Harlem at one point.
I mean, there was like a very short stage where it was kind of like, okay, here's what the show could be. Here's the idea that we have. And I took a few cracks at that. It felt very kind of like limited, just in like, trying to tell a nice story that didn't feel like it bumped the movies because, if Ned's there, Ned can't find out he's Spider-Man because Ned finds out in Homecoming. So Peter can't fight certain levels of villains because he has to be kind of low scale by the time we meet him in Civil War. Very early on, we were like, okay, we're going to like kind of blow things up, tell a completely new story, and really just kind of allow ourselves to use any characters we want. We can use, a character like Dr. Octopus or Norman Osborn or characters that hadn't been introduced in the MCU just yet. So yeah, it really opened it up.
I really enjoyed how you did race and gender bend so many characters, but then you kind of grounded the series by having characters in their original art style. Or their original costumes. Was that a choice of yours or the designer?
That was a really kind of a collaborative choice really early on. We were like, okay, we want to do something that sets us apart. Trying to find that look, we went all the way back to the beginning, that early Ditko look, the Jack Kirby, John Romita Sr., and just kind of like leaned on that. And we're like, okay, well, if we were to make that now, if we were to modernize these, how can we kind of like pull them to the forefront, but also make sure that we're giving them all the respect they deserve. So I think just really early on in trying to figure out our identity, we were like, okay, this feels like a nice place that we can kind of plant our flag.
Talk to me about the animation style and the choices made there. I do love, especially during the action scenes, there are times that like it moves from panel to panel. And it reminds me a bit of a motion comic, but I'm not quite sure. It feels like the frame rate is smaller and just the art feels different. Did you choose that?
That was another like kind of big conversation as we were figuring out the show. Just trying to figure out the look. You know, once we figured out the look, what's the style that we want to go with? And we were really fortunate to work with Polygon Pictures in Tokyo and CGCG in Taipei, who do just incredible 3D animation, CG animation. So once we figured that out, we were like, okay, we want to do a 3D show with a 2D look. So like, how do we make that happen? And, you know, there was a lot of trial and error in figuring that out, but I think we landed on something cool, especially like, as you're talking about the comic panels, like that was not a thing we thought about at script, you know, but once we got to boards, our board artists were like throwing stuff in. We're like, oh, this is cool. This can kind of really help sell that we're a moving comic. We're kind of a motion comic, but with a lot more fluidity, I think that 3D allows us to do, but also like being able to channel that kind of classic comic vibe with the 2D look.
What made you start the origin story the way you did? We got to see Peter get bit, but then we see a huge jump. But we also find out that Ben is dead. So what made you make those two choices specifically?
I think for every Spider-Man fan, you know, you've seen the story. We all know it. And, you know, even in Homecoming, they just kind of jump over it because it's like, okay, we all know. When we knew we wanted to do the Spider Bite, it was like, okay, how do we make it new? Because so much of our show is like familiar but different. So really leaning on like, okay, he's going to get bit. We're all expecting him to get bit. We're waiting for him to get bit. So how do we make it something that is completely unexpected and still fun and still engaging? So that was the thing I wanted to do. And then also just like, I never wanted to like kind of rehash the Uncle Ben death. I think it's a really powerful moment. But again, it's a thing that we've seen so many times. And for me, I think there's something cool to having Ben be a figure that is throughout Peter's life. I didn't want to like make him a soundbite or where it's a thing where it's like, okay, here's this big moment. Now he says this one perfect thing that encapsulates everything to Peter, and that's what Peter can take forward. I think it's important that like Peter has a lot of little lessons from Ben, and those are the things that really paint who he is. He's had all these years with this character, with his uncle that he loves. So like, I think that should kind of be his through line. And as the series goes on, we learn a bit more about Ben and just kind of all the things he imparted on Peter.
Now, do you believe in canon events? Is that a part of your Spider universe?
No, I think
so. Miguel was lying.
I mean,
he was capping.
He was. I mean, I wouldn't have believed him.
I forget you're like media trained to the gods. There was a lot of criticism for the MCU's Spider-Man around his relationship with Tony Stark and him potentially seeming like Tony Stark Jr. Walk me through your choice of choosing Norman to kind of take that role of Tony Stark, and how do you make Spider-Man his own character without being like just Norman Osborn Jr.?
That's a really good question.
I did some work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not discrediting you.
You know what I'm saying?
You asked great questions.
Thank you.
I mean, honestly, like, for me, very early on, the kind of conceit of the show was like, okay, we build up to this moment, and he walks in, but instead of Tony on the couch, it's blank, you know? So then it was like, okay, what's really interesting? What's a fun version of this? Does he walk in and it's Cap, and Cap's trying to recruit him, and it's the other side, or does he walk in and it's someone completely different? And once I landed on Norman, it was like, okay, there's so much potential here, because we all know who Norman is, or, you know, we all have an idea of Norman from 60 years of Spider-Man history. So for me, it was like, okay, if I were a fan and I were watching, I would want to be interested in that. But to your point, like, the thing that I think is interesting is like, when Norman is the mentor, you're expecting certain things to go bad. So it's very easy to write Peter as like hopeful and, you know, trusting and, then from that point of view, it's like, oh, well, Norman is like going to take advantage of this hero that we all love. So I think right off the bat, there's never any, I think, conceit of him turning into Norman Jr. because we are all kind of like, well, Peter is Peter and Norman is Norman.
Right.
So for me, it's more like maybe Norman's not a bad guy. Maybe we want Peter to be Norman Jr. Who knows, Maybe Peter's gone down the wrong path and Norman can help him. So just introducing those questions, I think, makes for a really fun dynamic between those two.
I love Norman in this. I'm hoping he's as ethical as a billionaire can be. Did you plan on Coleman Domingo? Was he on your wish list to be on? It just was like, you got him on the desk.
I wish I had planned on Coleman. Honestly, we were just trying to figure out who could play Norman. And as we were kind of building out that character, it was like, okay, well, he needs gravitas. He needs to feel controlling of a room, but also he needs to feel believable because everyone's going to come in oh, this is Norman. I don't trust him. And Coleman is the perfect guy of he's just so likable and so warm that, you can't help but be charmed by him, like you're saying. But also, everything he says feels like it has two layers where you're like, should I believe this? Our supervising producer, Mel Dwyer, is actually the person who, one day was like, what about Coleman Domingo? And I was like, you're a genius. We need to get Coleman. But, he's a huge star. And then we reached out and he was like, yes. And I was like, oh, okay, great.
You're like, let's do this.
Please.
Do you think in this universe, the beauty supply stores take pictures of Norman Osborn and puts him on do-rag covers like they do with Little Bow Wow?
I like that by the logic of this question.
No, these...
Wait, no, I want to step this out.
Yeah, you're like, let me map out what this question means, right?
So are you asking, does he sign up to go get they're like, yo, we'll give you this
So a
deal.
lot of these do-rag companies just take the likeness.
Oh, so Bow Wow's not getting paid.
I don't think so. Maybe he is. I can't speak to it. I would hope, right? But if he is, I know there are some people who they just take their likeness and throw them on there. There's no rules in the beauty supply stores, particularly the ones in Harlem and Queens. So I could imagine Norman's waves are just on seasick all the time, and they're like, how do we sell these do-rags?
I feel like if he knew, he would shut it down and then make his own brand of Oscorp do-rag. So, I mean, maybe that's a season 2 story.
I would please,
be down, yeah.
but credit me, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You race and gender bet a lot of the characters. And honestly, I think it makes the New York that's built, it makes more sense. Even reading Spider-Man, watching it this entire time, I'm like, why are there so many white people in Queens? What made you make that choice?
I mean, it was honestly just coming from Crack of the Creek, which is the most diverse show that I've been fortunate enough to work on. I took so much from that, and I know how much that means to so many people to be seen. And so when I got to this, it was I'm looking at these comics, I want to make something that is indicative of Spider-Man, is representative of Spider-Man, but also I want it to be modern, and I want to make sure that again, people feel represented. So for me, it was very simple. I'm like, okay, well, New York is so diverse, we need to see that on the screen. And that was a conversation early on with Marvel of just hey, is it cool if I gender swap these characters? Is it cool if I make Norman Osborn a black man? And immediately they're like, yeah, please, do whatever you feel is necessary. So they've been super supportive, and it's been awesome.
I love that for you. What made you choose Nico as a sidekick? I know you were talking about Ned earlier, but you could have chose anyone. I
love Nico. I think she's a fantastic character. It's honestly that simple. She's so interesting and likable and fun, and just I'm a huge fan of that character. So when they're like, hey, we're gonna give you free reign, use any of the Marvel characters you want to. It's an open book, and there's all this years of history, but also there's so many Spider-Man shows where it's oh, we've seen him hanging out with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. We've seen him hanging out with Cloak and Dagger. So I'm I love Runaways. I think she'd be cool to put in this world, and she fit perfectly.
What about your choice of Lonnie? Not only did you choose to have Lonnie Lincoln in this world, but he's kind of going through a parallel arc to Peter, where I don't know if he's going to be a full villain, But we do see him kind of going down what feels like the wrong path, and something that maybe Peter would have fell into had circumstances been different. What made you choose him in that storyline overall?
Lonnie has a lot of potential as a character, and not a lot has been done with him over the last 30 years, in my opinion. And, that's not through the fault of anyone, but I'm just like, oh, that's a character that, again, we can really dig into and kind of revitalize. Because, again, we're doing so much of, like, here's new characters that aren't in Spider-Man's world normally. So I also wanted to take a character that is in his world and just add even more to him. So really early on, it was like, okay, I have a fun story I think I can tell with Lonnie, and just really dig into him as a character, but also, like, present a new version of him.
Yeah.
Putting him with Peter is fun. I think naturally anyone who watches it is going to be like, oh, he's a jock, Peter's a nerd, he's going to bully him. And again, I don't want to do that. I think that, like, there's something really cool to them having, like, almost like a big brother, little brother relationship. But also, like, we all know, well, I won't say we all know, a good chunk of us know where Lonnie's story ends in the comics, or ends up going in the comics. So I think there's something fun about, like, following that journey, really, like, feeling for him as these obstacles are being placed in his path, and him having, like, a really cool dual journey with Peter, where they're both going through the same journey, but, like, different obstacles, different circumstances. I think it's cool. And I think it's, like, a nice shift, because Lonnie has, like, a wonderful home life, but Peter is an orphan for all intents and purposes. So just seeing that, like, in a lot of ways they're similar, but in a lot of ways they each kind of have something the other one doesn't, I think is really cool as well.
I didn't like the way Peter thought he was dumb and started mansplaining science to him like they're not at a specialized high school that you need to test to get in, okay? But we won't get into that.
It's also an athletic school. He might think he's gonna pass.
But you got to have a certain level, right?
And I went to a very, accredited high school that you had to test to get into, and I very quickly found out I was not as smart as everyone else and got dropped down a level.
That's fair, but he was, like, explaining the basic. He was like, oh, I'm sorry, this is what science is. And then he was like, and Lonnie was nice about it. He was like,
I'm used to it.
I can read. Like, he was like, I'm literate.
I mean, to be fair, if I was learning about stoichiometric compounds, I wouldn't know what the hell was going on.
But you wouldn't be in that class.
You saying that felt like just as charged as Peter.
I'm sorry, it was though. It was actually because you wrote.
Nice guy,
wrote Peter. Peter's a nice guy too. He's actually a nice guy. We were actually debating this earlier, and this is about Lonnie and his decision to take over, his brother's spot in the gang. I personally felt like that was for Lonnie more than his brother. Like, that's just something he's like, this is what I do. Like, he enjoys being the hero.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I right?
think that's a great interpretation.
Yeah, say that in the camera straight. So
that's a great interpretation.
Yeah. And I'm always right. Thank you, guys.
I mean, like, so much of his life is, like, he's the big man on campus at school. He's kind of, like, not really that much of a community figure. So I think even in him wanting to help his brother and kind of wanting to be viewed as the hero, it's definitely a choice for Lonnie. Yeah.
Okay. We're getting towards the end. There are two things I want to do. The first one is, by your own script, you said New Yorkers are built different and it's the best city in the world. Can you just say it straight to camera so everybody knows?
Peter said that.
Peter, you did. Who wrote
Norman
Peter?
said that.
Norman said it.
Yeah.
But you wrote Norman.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, Coleman said it. But,
that's crazy. All right.
When you get Coleman on here,
I invite you on my show. I bring you in. I give you water. All right. That's fine.
I'll say it.
Okay.
I'll say it. New York is the best city in the world if Detroit is not in the conversation.
Oh, that's kind of nuts. All right.
This ad was approved by Frankey Fantastic.
So I don't know if you're aware, I'm a huge DC fan. I heard you have an excellent Red Hood pitch.
You heard correctly.
I want to hear it. This is your time. To all 800 people who watch this video.
Now I'm locked into Marvel for the foreseeable future.
Right. This is your time. So that after the 3-5 seasons, whatever, right? Or you could simultaneously do it. You got time. You're like, whatever.
Yeah, I'm like,
But no. Like, can you say? Are you allowed to say?
I don't know.
Well,
I feel
we'll
like
find
it's
out.
gonna, yeah. I mean, I'm also like, that pitch was 5 years ago, so I barely remember. Basically, the gist of that pitch is you follow Jason. He's in Gotham. He's teaming up with Arsenal, who is kind of like recently relapsed and trying to like get back into heroing. But also, they come across another character by the name of Onyx, who is in the League of Assassins, who also joins in with their group. And it's kind of the trio of them dealing with crime in Gotham, but also the kind of fun sitcom of a BoJack Horseman, and them just kind of like dealing with each other's crap all the time.
I love that. So we actually have a gift for you.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
This is being shot at Blast from the Past in Burbank, California. It's a beautiful Eisner Award-winning nostalgia store. That is our PA, Alexis. I bought you a gift from here.
Wow.
There are a bunch of like, honestly, any fandom that you're into is in this store. Kind of to our point earlier about Spider-Man being like a mini Iron Man Jr. I bought you an Iron Man. So you can go in there. Yeah, you can.
Can I
Yeah,
open it?
yeah, you can open it. I also got you a Fanboy Fighter pin that's on the bottom. But yeah,
There you
nice
go.
little classic Iron Man McDonald's toy.
I love it.
I'm glad. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna put it right on my desk.
You should, and I want a picture of proof. I think Spider-Man is meant to be as a series, and you just give us time to, connect with him as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but then you slowly begin to raise the stakes to, as I DM'd you, what the fuck, at the end, I think was the last note I gave on it, but I really love the way that you created the world. I could tell how far everything was in New York, like the distance to everything. And also the fact that you race and gender bent everyone, it made it feel unpredictable. I don't know if this person is evil because they're so different. And I really love that you did that aspect of it. So thank you so much.
Oh my, you're so kind.
So
Give me
tell-
gifts and compliments.
I know. This is the nicest I'll ever be to you. One last gift I have. Please tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me at Mr. Jeff Trammell, 2 F's, 2 M's, 2 L's, on various social medias.
Most places?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
not going to name any because they might be canceled. But
They did a little bit. Well, you guys are already here, but just in case, you can find me all places at Fantastic Frankey, Frankey, like the key to your heart. And this has been Fighting Words. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.